Today on the Deep Dive, we're stepping away from the everyday noise. We're diving into Arthur Schopenhauer. His philosophy can be intense, maybe even brutally honest sometimes. The sources we're using today, they're from his essays on reading, writing, and living. And they really offer this quite radical blueprint, I think.
Yeah, liberating almost.
Right, for building up your intellectual life, finding some real self-sufficiency.
And you know, Schopenhauer, he always starts with this blast of cold reality. It's kind of his signature.
Yeah, no
And
kidding.
he sets the stage saying the world is just fundamentally not set up for our happiness. Human life, he says, is defined by these two constant enemies.
Okay, what are they?
First, there's suffering, misery, real affliction. And then even if you're lucky enough to dodge that, he basically guarantees the second enemy is waiting.
Which is?
Boredom. Just crushing boredom, lying in wait everywhere. That's the landscape.
Wow, okay, so quite the starting point. Our mission today, then, is to figure out Schopenhauer's way through this. How do we actually build up internal resources strong enough to deal with a world that's either painful or just dull?
Exactly. We're pulling out his principles for, well, choosing real thought over all the external noise and distraction.
Sounds like a defensive strategy almost.
It really is. He talks about building this inner fortress. I love the imagery he uses. The world is like a cold December night, harsh, empty. But the person who's internally wealthy, the person with rich inner resources, he says they're like a bright, warm, happy home at Christmas time. Completely shielded from that chill outside.
So inner wealth isn't just nice to have, it's essential. It's the only real shield against that boredom you mentioned.
That's his argument. It's the core defense.
Okay, let's dig into those two enemies then, suffering and boredom, because that seems central to his whole system. Life just swings between them.
Yeah, like a pendulum.
Yeah.
Constantly swinging. And he saw this playing out objectively based on social class, interestingly.
How so?
Well, for the vast majority, the lower classes, life is just this constant battle against suffering, poverty, illness, basic needs unmet. That's their primary struggle.
Okay.
But then you look at the upper classes, the ones who've achieved material security. The moment they escape that basic suffering, their fight completely shifts. They enter this desperate, ongoing war against boredom.
Right. But it wasn't just about money or class, was it? He brings in this internal dimension too, this sensitivity to your link.
Yes, exactly. And this is where it gets really fascinating, I think. He connects the capacity for pain directly to mental power, your intellect.
How does that work? More intelligence means more pain.
Pretty much. He argues sensitivity to suffering is directly proportional to your mental horsepower. So a dull mind, he calls it a kut bir kafa, actually feels less pain, less suffering.
Which sounds kind of good, actually.
Well, yes and no. Because that same dullness, that lack of inner spark, it points to what he called trubosluru, an internal emptiness. And that makes the person incredibly prone to just overwhelming boredom. They have nothing inside to occupy themselves.
Yeah, okay. So high intellect is this double-edged sword. It lets you build that warm house inside to fend off boredom. But it also dials up your sensitivity to all the suffering the world throws at you. That's quite a trade-off.
It is a tough one. But for Schopenhauer, it's the necessary price for any kind of real fulfillment, his conclusion. The happiest person is the one whose inner richness makes them almost entirely self-sufficient. They need very little from the outside.
That sounds like that Aristotle quote he liked.
Exactly. Mutlu olmak kendi yeter olmak demektir. Happiness is to be self-sufficient. That's the goal.
The problem, of course, is that most people aren't self-sufficient like that. Which brings us to the figure he calls the Philistines. Not a complimentary term.
No, definitely not. He uses philister, or darkafalo, narrow-minded person. This is someone with basically no inner life built up. So when they're free from, worrying about survival, they panic.
Panic?
Yeah, they don't know what to do with themselves, so they desperately seek external things, society, parties, entertainment, anything to fill the void. And this desperate chase, he says, it just drags them into extravagance and ultimately misery.
And this is where that idea of internal emptiness really hits home today, isn't it? The symptom is this constant need for outside stimulation, just to get the will moving, because the mind itself is idle.
Precisely. Their thoughts aren't self-generated, they rely on external triggers. And that's why the Philistine chases what Schopenhauer calls contemptible amusements. Things that require no thought, but keep them occupied.
Like his famous example, card games.
Right, card games. He saw playing cards as literally a declaration of intellectual bankruptcy. A bit harsh, maybe.
What's so harsh?
Because, well, it takes zero real thought, right? but it perfectly engages the will, the desire to win money. And he also notes it kind of encourages dishonesty, trying to trick money out of others, blurring that line between mine and thine.
Hmm. I mean, okay, but is playing a game of poker really a sign of intellectual ruin? Isn't some downtime, some simple entertainment okay?
And that's the tension, right? He wants us to feel that friction. He's not against rest. He's against using distraction as a substitute for actual thinking, for reflection.
Okay.
And if you map that onto today, the source itself notes the parallel. When the mind's empty, it craves constant, easy hits of stimulation.
You mean like scrolling through social media,
Yeah.
binge watching, the 24/7 news cycle?
Exactly. The source mentions the more complex instruments of technology. They are today's card games, essentially.
Yeah.
Short, easy bursts of stimulation, the like, the notification, the endless scroll, it activates the will, gives that little dopamine hit.
Without ever needing an original thought.
Precisely. It's the perfect way to manage that inner emptiness without ever having to, actually fill it.
So the Philistine runs outward towards noise, towards crowds, because they're terrified of silence, terrified of their own empty mind. What does the opposite look like? The person who has built that inner fortress.
They seek the exact opposite. Quiet, leisure, solitude. Schopenhauer calls leisure real, uninterrupted free time the flower, or rather, the fruit of life.
Flower or fruit? Interesting.
Yeah, and for the wise person, this isn't empty time to be filled with distractions. It's fuel. Fuel for the continuous activity of thinking.
And that's the crucial difference, isn't it? For most people, free time just breeds boredom, maybe even foolishness. But for the person with inner wealth, it's the ultimate luxury.
Absolutely. Which
Yeah.
leads him to this really strong warning. It's just supreme folly, he says, to sacrifice your quiet, your leisure, your independence for external things like fame, status, fancy titles.
He even called out Goethe for doing that, right?
Yeah, he saw Goethe as someone who, unfortunately, in his view, traded inner peace for outer glory. The truly wise person knows their value is internal, not based on what other people think or what titles they have.
Okay, so let's pivot to how we actually build that inner wealth. Cultivating the mind itself. And this is where Schopenhauer drops another bombshell. Beware of reading too much.
Yeah, this is such a key point and kind of paradoxical, isn't it? Especially for anyone who loves learning.
Right. How can reading too much be bad?
It's about passive reading, just consuming information without taking the time to really digest it, to reflect on it. If you do that too much, he argues, it actually paralyzes your ability to think for yourself.
How? What's the mechanism there?
He uses some great analogies. Imagine a student who only ever traces over the teacher's drawings. They get really good at copying.
But they can't draw anything original.
Exactly. Or think of someone who rides a horse so much they forget how to walk. If your mind is constantly being pressed down by other people's thoughts, the thoughts in books like a heavy weight on a spring,
It loses its bounce, its elasticity.
right, it loses its own power to spring back, to generate its own ideas. It just gets crowded out by all the external input.
That makes so much sense. We often measure ourselves by how many books we read. But he's saying the quantity can be the enemy if it stops you from actually thinking and synthesizing.
Totally. Knowledge has to be earned internally. He uses this biological analogy, like how we only digest a fraction of the food we eat. Only the reading that we actively reflect on gets truly absorbed. Reading gives you the ingredients, the raw material. But thinking is the digestion process. That's what turns it into part of you, a living organ, he says.
It reminds me of that Goethe quote Schopenhauer liked. What you have inherited from your fathers, acquire it in order to possess it. You have to make it your own.
Precisely. You have to work for it internally. And this is the difference, Schopenhauer says, between a real thinker and just a book philosopher.
Okay, explain that difference.
The true thinker learns directly from the book of nature, from real life experience, observation. The book philosopher, they just know what's in other books. They're dealing in secondhand ideas.
I don't know, say, I sometimes struggle, when I sit down to write or think, to just make the insights come. Can we force this kind of thinking?
Schopenhauer says, no, not really. And he's quite realistic about it. You can't just switch on profound thought like a light bulb. Thoughts are like people. He says you have to wait for them to arrive. You can't command them.
So what do? Just wait around?
Well, you create the conditions. The key, he suggests, is being prepared. And the best fuel for thought comes from engaging with the real world, not just sitting with books. You need that raw material from life, from observation, for your mind to chew on when it finally gets quiet.
Okay. This demand for genuine thought, for clarity, it seems like it flows right into his ideas about writing, too. If we're meant to think for ourselves, writers need to be honest.
Absolutely. It's all connected. He actually sorts authors into two basic types.
What are they?
Type 1. These are the rare ones. They write only because they have something important to say about the subject itself. The subject compels them. Their work has real value.
And type 2.
Type 2s are, well, they're everywhere. They write just to fill pages, or mostly just for money. And this is where he brings in that Spanish proverb. Honor and profit don't mix well. Writing mainly for cash, he believed, just corrupts the whole process. The authenticity goes out the window.
And this connects to how they write, their style.
Yes, directly.
Yep.
He famously said that style is the physiognomy of the mind, meaning how you write is a much better clue to your real intelligence and character than your actual physical face.
Wow. So what makes for good style then?
Simplicity, clarity, truthfulness. The number one rule for good style, he says, is simple. The writer should have something to say, something genuine.
And bad style.
Bad style is just a mask. It's what writers use to hide the fact that they don't really have much to say. It's what he called douchences cephati, poverty of thought.
And how does that show up?
Oh, you see it all the time. Pretentiousness, being deliberately obscure, rambling sentences, using jargon unnecessarily.
Like using fancy academic words when simple ones would do.
Exactly. He specifically called out using overly complicated verbs and phrases like saying to condition something instead of just to cause it. It's making things sound complex to seem deep, but usually it just hides a shallow idea. Clarity is the enemy of the charlatan writer.
This framework, clear thought, clear writing, it feels like a really useful guide for us today, especially with information overload. He helps us filter what to read right by dividing literature into two camps.
Yes, ephemeral versus enduring.
Ephemeral, like fleeting.
Exactly. Ephemeral literature is the stuff that advances at a gallop. Thousands of books published every year. Written, he says, by people who live on science or art, meaning they make a living producing content, but aren't necessarily dedicated to the truth or beauty of it.
And these books just disappear quickly.
Pretty much. But the Philistines, remember him, he feels obligated to read the newest stuff even if it's terrible, just so he has something current to talk about, keeping up with the Joneses, intellectually speaking.
Okay, so that's the fleeting stuff. What about the enduring literature?
That advances with a silent dignity. Maybe only a dozen truly great works emerge in a whole century. And these are written by people who live for science or art. They're driven by the subject itself, not by fame or money.
So his advice is pretty clear then.
Crystal clear and very practical. Ignore the noise, ignore the temporary buzz, stick exclusively to the great minds, the enduring works from all times and all places. Don't waste your precious time and mental energy on the latest trendy garbage just because it's new.
Life's too short for bad books, basically.
That's the essence of it. Read the classics. Read what has lasted.
Okay, so let's wrap this up and bring Schopenhauer's framework together for you, the listener. The path he lays out, it's about internal freedom. It's about escaping that relentless pendulum of suffering and boredom. And the way to do that is by building deep inner resources, that Zegen-Lacey, that inner wealth, protecting your quiet time, your solitude, and being really rigorous about choosing active, thoughtful digestion over just passively consuming information or chasing distractions.
But there's a final crucial point. It's the challenging undercurrent to this whole philosophy. The sources are clear. The happiest fate is to have that rich inner life, that powerful intellect.
Okay. But there's a catch, isn't there?
There's a big catch. The source states it explicitly. As your reason, your intellect develops, so does your capacity to suffer. In fact, suffering reaches its absolute peak at the highest levels of intellectual awareness. Remember that sensitivity point.
Ah, right. The double-edged sword again. So you gain the fortress against boredom, but you become more acutely aware of and sensitive to the world's inherent suffering.
Exactly. So you now have the map. You know Schopenhauer's path to inner wealth, to intellectual freedom. That fortress is within your power to build.
But the final question is for you. It's provocative and maybe a little uncomfortable. Are you actually willing to embrace the price? Are you ready for that inevitable increase in sensitivity, maybe even suffering, that comes hand in hand with achieving that higher level of intellect? It's a choice, isn't it? Between the perhaps easier, duller life of the Philistines
and the difficult, sometimes painful, but ultimately richer life of the truly thoughtful, self-sufficient individual. That's the choice Schopenhauer leaves us with.